Okay, here's an interesting one. The Italian model 1916 Revolver. The holster, we're going to put this over here for now. Very interesting gun, kind of unusual. And when it comes to collecting something like this, is pretty confusing. If you want to find online pictures and listings and auctions of this gun, you would put down the Italian model 1916 Revolver and you'll see this pistol. This gun was used by the Italian military. It was never officially adopted. Therefore, you will not find it in any of your small arms of the world listing or anything else. As usual in wartime, they run out of material or they come short of pistols, whatever. Countries will allow their officers, I guess, to buy handguns privately. And what they did is they imported these from Spain. What this gun actually is there's a Spanish gun maker called Orbea Hermanos that was in business from 1840 until 1926, and they copied Smith & Wesson pistols. So what they actually made is a copy of the Smith & Wesson first model double action. They did make, and were famous for making copies of the Smith & Wesson No. 3 Russian in different calibers. It'd be the 44 Russian, and they had contracts where they sent them to Cuba and a couple South American countries. This is a copy of the Smith double action break top revolver. And the reason, and we'll do our safety check to make everybody happy, we're empty. The reason it gets its name is here on the top strap, where usually here you would have the Smith & Wesson address. Basically, let me make sure. Revolver model 1916, caliber 10.35 is what it kind of says up there. And you should have here, we're on this example, that's kind of why I got it real reasonable, is you see where someone went and prick punched and stamped out something there. And what that should say on there is FTVTTONI Bresca. Should be where them prick punch, they obliterated it. What that is, there was some confusion. That's why a lot of people will say that these are Italian-made guns. I do not believe they are, okay? And I'll go over why. What that marking was the importer's marking. The company that imported the guns into Italy stamped that on there. I've seen versions that have that stamped on there. I'm not quite sure what was stamped on there, because it's been destroyed. But that was the importer's stamp. But if you look at the grips, you have the OH, and these guys are real good. On the other side of the frame here is a trademark, which looks like, I don't know if you could see it or not. Let me see where that is exactly. It's right here above the grip, pretty small. I can't hardly see it, but it looks like a Smith & Wesson trademark, but instead of S and W, it says O and H. So these guys made pretty much a knockoff of the Smith & Wesson pistol. And this is just like a giant copy, like your Harrington and Richardsons, your Ivor Johnsons, which made cheap copies of your Smith & Wesson pistols all through the 1880s and 90s. Okay, I just had to get my thoughts together for a minute because it is kind of confusing. So even though this is called the Italian Revolver of 1916, it is not an Italian-made gun. It is a Spanish copy of a Smith & Wesson in the 10.35 Italian caliber, which was used as a supplementary pistol by, I guess, the Italian Army. Now, looking at this gun, like I said, other than the markings being obliterated, there was a lanyard loop that goes on here, which is missing. So that's one other thing that's missing. And this is a single action, double action gun. Okay, Smith & Wesson style, break top, little toggle that you pull up just like a Smith, and gives your ejection. And like the H&Rs, Ivor Johnsons, you know, there's a difference in the mechanism that cuts down on the cost of manufacturing these guns. Now, this particular gun was made, you'll find this 1916 model in the Italian version. They also made them for the British, okay, in the Webley caliber, or I'm not quite sure, 45 Webley. You'll find them like this also in that caliber. And they may have even been made, some of them the British bought in Belgium. Belgium was another country that copied Smith & Wesson handguns. The only thing is the Belgian quality was better, where the Spanish ones can get a little questionable. This one doesn't look too terrible. The rifling's good, it's not in bad shape. You know, when you check the lockup, it's not too bad. There's a little bit of wobble in there. But what happens with these copies is they will wear out, shoot loose, and not lock up quicker than, you know, like an actual Smith & Wesson made of good quality. It's an interesting piece. Like I said, it was used by the Italian Army. And it's just a big copy of Smith & Wesson. The big Smith. It's pretty neat. Now, when I slugged the bore, it come out to 427, which is the older groove diameter for the 4440, which I think the Italian pistol slugged out to 424, which 423 is like the bullet that goes in the Italian round listed in Cartridges of the World. So it's close. So they probably went and just threw a cylinder on here that would accept the Italian round. And now the ammo that I make, as compared, okay, does drop in there fairly easily. I haven't shot this gun yet, but it fits fairly well. It's not real loose. So the cylinder is cut for this cartridge. You know, it's not something else that was made like a 4440 or something. So you get these guns, they're an odd gun, and if you look in one of the price guides for military weapons, if you look under Spain, there's a paragraph in there that states that during World War I they made and exported to supplement the Italian and the British government with revolvers. That's how they're listed. You will not find this listed under any, like in Small Arms of the World, or under the price guides under the Italian military, because like I said, it wasn't formally adopted. But on the outside, it's not a terrible looking gun, but bird head style grips. And like I said, these grips are with the O&H trademark on there. This piece is in fairly decent shape, okay, other than, the guy went and tore up the markings on there. And there's no serial number. There was a serial number etched in there, electro-penned, and that's what I guess they used when I had this sent to me. That's the serial number that they used on it. So, double action brake top, interesting gun. Like I said, it was a little hard to identify it or figure out the history on it, but that's what it kind of basically come down to. It's what they call a secondary arm, which means it's manufactured elsewhere and purchased, and they're Spanish copies of a Smith & Wesson brake top revolver. Now the holster, shame about this, I'm not an expert on leather and that, but I've looked up for like the Smith & Wesson guns and that, and the holster appears to be the correct style holster for this particular style gun from way back when. Now I don't know if they manufactured the holsters too, and the strange thing about it, when you look in the back, there was something stitched on there, and then somebody went and cut that off and then cut 2 slots to like put a belt through it to wear it. So it probably had, like if you see on Italian holsters, some sort of thing with 2 loops that would go through a leather belt and then hang that way. But it's a shame because the holster's in fairly good shape. I didn't find any markings whatsoever on it, but it's not in bad condition if this is something that was original or came with it when they sold them as surplus. The design, like I said, I've seen this style or design for this particular gun in this time period. And like I said, I'm not an expert on it. Probably if they didn't cut the thing off the back, and I did some more research on it and found that it was the holsters that were originally issued with the guns. Like I said, there's not a lot of information. You'll find these and see these always listed as an Italian gun. And with the importer marking on there, people tell you that they're made in Italy. But they still have the Spanish maker's trademark and that on it. So I don't know if the holsters were made along with the gun or not. Not a lot of info on this weapon. But it's a shame because probably if the holster wasn't messed with, it'd probably be worth more than the gun itself. So again, this is another interesting little thing I picked up. And like I said, with that damage on there, I kind of got it reasonable. I didn't put a ton of money into this thing. It was just a curiosity, and that's my research so far on it. That's what I've come up with on what it is. And like I said, if you do an internet search, Google search, you will find listings and photographs of this particular gun. You'll also find it listed in the British caliber. And a little study on the history of the company. They made these guns for years, and a lot of there was some sort of police unit that used them in 44 Russian. They were made in 44 Russian. You can find copies of this in 4440, the British caliber, this Italian 10.35, and others. And this company did go up into the 20s and made copies of the Smith & Wesson hand ejector. So it's very interesting. And like I said, sometimes you run across something, there's a lot of information out there that don't jive and people get it wrong. They're not Italian-made guns, they're Spanish-made guns. But like I said, the reason you get the confusion is they were used by the Italian military during World War I. So, interesting mil surplus gun, interesting history, needs a little more research. And then maybe once the weather gets better, I'll take it out and try to put a few rounds through this. Being the quality in that, I probably won't fire it a lot. I can shoot it a little bit and see how it works. That'd be great, but it's not something that I don't think you'd want to put 1,000 rounds through, because by then it'll probably shoot loose and detract from the value of it also. Okay, so that's about all I found out on this particular gun, the Italian model 1916 Revolver.